Now, let's go to these guests. First, we have joining us Terrance Woodbury, who is Black America's pollster. He's the founder of HIT Strategies and has some amazing data to share with us today, not just reflecting on why Democrats lost in 2024, but where Black folks are right now, because sometimes somebody got to talk about Black data. This group has never been polled. We talk about it all the time. Terrance, we want to do one of your polls. Gary Chambers Jr. is also joining us. He is founder of Bigger Than Me. He is the champion in the South. Let me tell you, if there's one person that's going to flip a state black, I didn't say red or blue, he going to flip it black. It is going to be Gary Chambers. Whenever he joins us on camera, Gary, your camera is off.
And get off
he is not a ghost of Christmas past. He is actually here in the building, y'all. And when there he is.
In his building. He in his building.
He's in our virtual home, and that's why we say welcome home, Andrew Gillum. But yes, Gary Chambers Jr., and he's going to talk to us, too, a little bit about the election coming up this Saturday.
And had an amazing ad, Angela. That amazing ad that we played and
on
talked
this
about.
podcast. And so we won't revisit it. We will tell y'all to go back and look at that clip.
Do we remember when that was? I don't even remember.
We were in New York because we had a nice salute to you.
Hey, guys, I just want to point out that we told them that they were going to start with us about 30 minutes ago. So let's jump into the conversation.
Sorry, you guys.
Welcome home, Terrance and Gary. I think Gary's
Thanks for having me, fam. It's good to be here on Native Land Pod.
I see you representing Mo House.
Always, all day.
Mo House.
Happy to have you guys. Let's get right into it. Who should we start with? Terrance,
Let's start with this data.
Yes.
Listen, thank y'all so much for having me. HIT Strategies has been pouring through this data, this post-election data, exit poll data, voter file data, and we've been sitting in focus groups with voters of color and young folks for the past couple of weeks since the election to understand what happened, why it happened, how we fix it moving forward. And one of the first things we see here is despite the valiant efforts of the Harris campaign, I was on the Harris campaign for full transparency, despite the efforts of the Harris campaign, who was able to close some of the gaps that we saw when Biden was at the top of the ticket. She, in fact, closed a 22-point gap amongst young voters, an 18-point gap amongst Black voters. Despite those efforts, Democrats continue to underperform with all the groups that we consider our base voters. So we got 3% less votes overall, but that includes 6% less votes from young people, 5% less from young Black voters, 19 points less amongst Latino voters, 19 points, and 2% less amongst Black men. Shout out to Black men who tried to hold the line, and who had the smallest reduction across any other group of men. But I do want to talk about that 2% real quick, because while Joe Biden got 79% of Black men's votes and Kamala Harris got 77%, the concern for me is the trend over time, y'all. It's that over time we've seen 3 to 5 point less Black support amongst Black men until Barack Obama had 92%, Hillary Clinton had 82%, and Kamala Harris had 77%. And so I've been arguing that, just calling it sexism is kind of lazy analysis of what's happening. This has been ongoing over time, and Democrats got some work to do to bring these brothers, not just Black men, but men, bringing men back into the Democratic coalition.
Wow.
I think that that's so powerful. I know we can probably go to the next slide, but I think it's powerful to hear. One, we were all together recently, and there was a very heated conversation around whether or not it was sexism. Sure, sexism is at play, but you saw this consistent drop off from Clinton to Joe Biden, and that was at one of the higher turnout years. Joe Biden's year was actually an outlier, right? From what we know, the numbers were much higher. What do you think is the reason, Terrance, based on what you've heard, if it's not sexism, regardless of how we might feel about the numbers, what the numbers say?
Yeah, look, there are several factors contributing to underperformance of men, but overwhelmingly, men are starting to identify the Republican Party as representing their values, representing the things that they care about. I don't want to negate sexism. In fact, the slide that's up here now has a very important question I think starts to explain explain where the Black community is on issues of gender and gender roles. When we ask the question, do you agree or disagree that men should be head of household, 66% of Black people believe that men should be head of household, including 59% of Black women, that's the majority, and 75% of Black men. I would argue that believing that men should be head of household is not a sexist value, right? It's a traditionally religious value. And it's one where we have to bring men along this conversation to explain that the role of gender in society is evolving, and there's a place for them in it. When Barack Obama was running for president and racism had the potential to undermine his candidacy, he didn't wag his finger at white folks and say, shame on you, right? He had a conversation with America about how we're not red states and blue states. We're not Black states and white states. And how even his grandmother, his white Hawaiian grandmother, held unconscious bias. And he offered an opportunity for America to move beyond that bias. Well, we didn't offer that to Black men. We said either you're with us or you're bad. Either you're with us or you're wrong. Either you're with us or you're immoral. You know, we're telling them that their Bible is wrong. And so there's another way here to bring men, not just Black men, but to bring men along this journey as society is evolving, and to ensure that they know that it's not all masculinity is toxic and there's going to be a place for them in it, but we're going to have to define what that non-toxic masculinity is.
I was about to say, Terrance, some of this is, I hate if this is a minor point, but, okay, we were raised to believe that men should be at the head of the household. I wonder what it means functionally. Because I think I grew up with that belief as well. I just don't know how it plays out, right? Like who writing the checks? Who's turning the head when it needs to be, those sorts of things are, I would just say this about that statement of, do you believe that men should be head of that? I think many of us cop to that, believe in it, subscribe to it, mostly, as you pointed out, through a religious premise. And if we had to write functionally down, what does it mean to have men as head of the household? I think everybody's list is going to look different.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm glad that probably isn't the question that you asked. But I also think that your point around the rise in men choosing Republican or the Republican Party as home or reflective, I kind of think it's the party you can be a member of and not be judged and not be held accountable. Exactly right. That you can say what it is that you think in your innermost moments and nobody's going to cancel you. That it's safe because the stakes appear to be not as high with what you do or don't do.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly right. Masculinity has become so triggering on the left. I mean, I've had this conversation in groups of progressives who've asked me, well, what is a non-toxic version of masculinity? As if they don't know non-toxic men, as if I'm not standing in the room presenting this data, right? And so there are values like masculinity, like hard work, religion, patriotism, family, all these things that we have ceded to the right. I had a young man tell me in a focus group, anytime he sees an American flag on somebody's house, he knows they're white and he knows they're Republican. Well, we're not going to be able to just cede family values, patriotism, masculinity. I could tell you right now, all of those values are more important to my father than the Democratic Party.
Can I ask you really quick? By the way, this is quickly becoming, I just texted the co-host. I was like, this is my favorite podcast ever so far.
I know. But I'm so into it.
I'm really into it too. So thank you guys. Gary, I want to get you in here because I know there are some thoughts and feelings and ideas you have. Like you don't necessarily do focus groups, but you be in the streets with the people. So I want to hear from you on like not only the part about the head of the household, but also what you think is the cause of the shift. Now Terrance typing his ass off.
I was going to say, who is typing?
That's Terrance. Look at Terrance. Guilty.
Terrance creating a new slide over there.
He didn't want me to ask you a good question, Gary. He know I can't focus. That is so rude. But no, I'm just playing. But the head of household piece, especially being in the South, but also what you think is the reason, like when you talk to people, what's the reason for them to have even either stayed at home in 24, particularly Black men, or to have voted against their interests and voted with the Trump party?
I think it's, first of all, thank you all for having me today.
Thank you, brother, for being here.
An important conversation. I have struggled with what I feel is getting the voices of Black men to be heard in this season, right? I think that there's been a period of time, and Black men and men, the patriarchal structure of America, has been guilty of muting women and their perspectives for so long that once we began to sit back and listen a little bit, our voices in response have not been heard. And I think you see that in the reactions in elections, right? I think that overwhelmingly we see that Black men want to be for the policies and the things that Democrats are for. However, if you are telling me that I have to be for something, well, damn it, I'm a man, right? I ain't got to be for nothing. And so what you see in some men is a automatic rejection to the fact that I get to have a say in what is happening here, right? We have been talked at so much rather than talked to. When we talk about the 20% of Black men who are on the other side, we spend so much time talking about them and so little time valuing the 80% of Black men who were on the side of Democrats, who have been supporting Black women. I'm from a city, Baton Rouge, where for over a decade, the majority of our elected officials in the Black community were Black women because Black men and women put them in power. That's how we ended up with a Sharon Weston Broome as the first Black woman mayor of our city, right? And her career would not get there if Black men had not supported her. So I think that acknowledgement of Black men has to happen at a greater pace, at a louder volume than we have had in the past. When the vice president was running, I tell you personally, there are people I reached out to in August saying, I think we should be having some roundtables with brothers. We should be doing some things. I was told in nice ways and not so nice ways by certain people, like, look, we ain't focused on that right now. You know, we need to get white America, middle America, all of this. And one of the things I've said to Democrats in the beginning from day one is, if your base is Black men and Black women, if that is the base, you take care of them before you go see about anybody else, right? You make sure that those people are satisfied, that they feel valued. And in our community, Black women are always more loyal than Black men are going to be in these situations. If you come testing us with certain situations, we're going to look for the other option, okay? Black women have a lot more. Black women have a lot more to sacrifice through this government, right? The government isn't trying to take away our right to see a doctor the way that we need to. So there are certain things that Black women cannot negotiate with in this scenario that Black men can. The other thing I think is the Democratic Party sucks at an economic message. When you talk about this conversation about who's the head of household, Black men are concerned about how they provide for their families, how they show up in the world financially, and how we do that. When we look at 59% of Black women saying that they see that role is the head of the household is for a Black man, that is because they see the role of a Black man as providing for his family and creating stability for his family. Whether that is a 50-50 makeup of the household or taking care of 100% of the bills, because there's a lot of Black women in America who don't pay a bill because a Black man pays them all. Okay, those Black men are not praised or considered enough in the conversations. And that is a part of the problem, because we spend so much time listening to the podcast bros who have gotten so much voice in this hour that we have abandoned the voices of the men who have been anchors in our communities for decades. The reason I learned how to follow a Black woman's leadership, my pastor was a Black woman who had a Black husband who was 6'5" and 250 pounds, who would pound you on the top of your head if you said anything about his wife. And when he was the lead, I never struggled with seeing a Black woman in leadership, because the person who taught me my faith was a Black woman, but she was supported by a strong Black man, right? And that was an example that was shown to me from infancy until this day. We don't let the Jim Howards of the world get enough shine today.
I have, I'm so grateful to you brothers for being here. Because I have so many thoughts on everything you just said. And Gary, every time you speak, it almost feels like I'm in church. I feel like you always, delivering a word. So I really appreciate your perspective. So I'm saying that if you will give me a little bit of space and grace to vent a bit, because I see these slides and I try to be really honest and unfiltered on this podcast. The one area where I feel like I filter myself is when I'm talking about Black men, because I never want it to come across like I'm putting Black men down, even though I believe we rightfully have some righteous frustrations with our brothers. In transparency, I'm writing about this. So y'all will read about all of these thoughts, and that's why I find the data so fascinating. One, when they say when Black men say their thoughts about being the head of the household. Okay, you believe Black men should be the head of the household. Does that mean a Black woman cannot be the head of a nation? And I wonder what the dichotomy is there. Two, yes, Black men overwhelmingly are Democratic voters. I would be remiss if I didn't remind everyone that when this country had an opportunity to elect the first Black man to the highest office of the land, everyone in the Black community were right behind him. Post-primary, everybody rallied behind him. You did not hear droves of Black women saying, well, wait, before I give him my support, what's he doing for me? I don't want to hear about Black men. What are you doing specifically for me as a Black woman? No, we were right behind President Obama. We were right there campaigning, organizing. And sometimes it does feel like Black women, we keep the greater good in mind. Our interest is not so self-centered. When we organize, we are organizing for the greater good. It seems like the Republican Party is able to pick off these Black men because of something individual, something that they will individually get. We've seen example like this time after time. You take Snoop Dogg with Rick Caruso in Los Angeles. It was something that he specifically got. You can take, I don't want to center on celebrities because they're, this is across the board, but it's something that speaks specifically to them. As a woman, I'll be honest, I do have some belief in what people might call toxic masculinity. One, I don't want to drive ever. Like somebody else needs to always drive me. Two, I ain't never pumping no gas. I don't never want to pump. No, I don't want to touch gas. Somebody else is doing that. Three, I don't want to take out no trash. Like I do believe in traditional gender roles in a lot of ways. And I think there is something interesting happening, which is what I'm exploring in my writing. There's something interesting happening in this dichotomy between Black men and Black women where it is an immediate animus upon meeting each other. What are you trying to take from me? What is it you're going to give to me? Even these terms like a high value man, high value woman. And that kind of toxic thinking has penetrated our politics in a way where you are throwing a tantrum in the voting booth, again, because of something that you are dealing with personally. And look, I done been killed, okay? I done been wronged by Black men. I've probably, popped off at the mouth to Black men in ways I shouldn't have. I can still consider the greater good in my policy and in my politics. And it doesn't seem like that exists always. So I'm not putting brothers down, but I do believe we have righteous frustrations that need to be addressed. And I think it's a family conversation, not one to have on a round table in front of folk who ain't kinfolk.
Can I just say this really quick before you guys weigh in? It's just a filter. I will tell you that, Tiff, I'm the one that pops off at the mouth at everybody. So I'll just own that. It don't matter if you're man, woman, boy, child. It don't matter. But I'm working on it. But I will say that I normally in conversations, I'm normally the friend that sounds very conservative about Black men. I'm normally the one that, Tiff is already nodding. I'm normally the one that's running to be like, well, did they really do it like that? What actually happened? Like, I'm very protective of Black men in that way. And I gotta say, I wonder if these numbers for Black men, their performance in the election for Kamala Harris in 24 would have looked different if Kamala Harris or a Kamala Harris would have run around the same time as Barack Obama or before. Follow me on this. I think that a lot of people threw everything aside for President Obama because he appeared to be the change, the hope we believed in, the reparations we deserve, the justice we'd finally see, the economic opportunity that we've always deserved, like all of these things. Or
the Black guy that looked like white people will vote for.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that wasn't part of this particular point, but I hear you. I think that's very fair. But this point was just on what Black people laid aside because we thought that this was going to finally be our opportunity. We were told to wait until his second term. So we waited until his second term. And when that second term came to an end, we were still on the chopping block. We still had to sacrifice the most. We still didn't get our needs met necessarily. I'm not saying
It was worse in some ways.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
So let's say all that. Although Trayvon Martin could have been his son, right? And Amazing Grace at Emmanuel after Emmanuel 9, Mother Emanuel massacre. All I'm saying is, some of the intense frustration with the parties reached a fever pitch after nothing really changed, especially when you go in the hood under a President Obama. So then you're like, okay, well, Hillary Clinton, they're like, I don't know. Now, if he couldn't do it, I really don't know. Then Donald Trump.
And she was super predator lady.
I'm clear. Donald
Right.
Trump, super predator lady. See, I peeped that too, Gary, but I'm with you. Also, she was born on my birthday, so shout out to Hillary. But I will just say this. You have those two, then you have Trump, and then you have this narrative that under Trump, people were doing better because they weren't prosecuted yet for them PPP loans and, all of the other things that check felt like it was going to go a little further. They didn't really understand the congressional role. They don't really remember it feeling like that under Joe Biden. Joe Biden is the same Joe Biden of the crime bill, to bring that back in, Gary, but they still pushed it aside. Particularly in 2020, because there's this George Floyd moment. But the George Floyd moment was lost too. And so we're back at square one. And I just have to wonder if in the flatness of data, Terrance, not in your skills, but in data, just looking at it on paper, if we don't miss all of the nuances, all of the times where the party we were told had our best interests really didn't, or at least we didn't feel like it did. Our circumstances didn't remarkably change. Did she get penalized for all of the baggage of the party and not so much because this was a woman at the top of a ticket? I'm not saying nobody was saying that BS, but I got to tell you, there are a lot of folks who are close to me who held their nose and voted for the party, not because Kamala Harris was at the top of the ticket. Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.